How's it going, everyone? Afar here. Welcome to Heliopolis Radio. Today, we're fortunate to be joined by Dena Paduano. She's an intuitive life coach with a passion for helping individuals achieve personal growth. So, without further ado, Dina, I hand it over to you. Tell us about yourself. What is it that you love to do?
Okay, so my name is Dina. I am an intuitive life coach. What is an intuitive life coach? What I do is we all have the gift of intuition, right? But I'm just a little bit more in tune with my gift. So what I do, because I'm a good coach and I've had years of therapy and years of books and years of practice and years of coaching, is that because I can tap into you intuitively, I can help you accelerate your process of your inner growth, your spiritual growth, and everything to tap into where you're at today and what it is that emotionally you need to work on and emotionally in which direction you need to go. I really love working with younger people. And when I say younger people, I'm talking anywhere from 17 to 40. Because I think it's so important now that I'm 55 and I'm understanding is that I didn't have a solid foundation emotionally, mentally, all of that. And to find yourself at 50 or in the middle of your 40s, in the middle of a life crisis, not having the tools that you thought that you were supposed to have or you should have, and realizing that I'm still living from a consciousness or something from the past is I'm like, well, no one ever taught us about that. Like, no one ever taught me that life wasn't about, especially being an American, right? It wasn't about having more stuff. It wasn't about having a bigger car, a better car, more
Mm,
this, more that. And then when I moved to Italy, it was shocking to me when they don't look at gifts in the holidays the way we do in the States,
mm,
or they don't, like, people look at me like, why does one person have so much stuff? In my state, that's a flex. In my country, in this
mm.
country, it is not, right? And so then I started going, wait a minute. And then I started thinking and seeing, and it wasn't until the young girls in my neighborhood, they're like 12, they were the ones, because I get them to help me for $10 because I have a bad back, to clean up my house. And they were the ones who started with the stuff thing. And I was like, what? Don't be rude. Like, and they're like, but I just don't get it. They wanted me to explain it. And then it took me getting on the levels of these young people without my ego getting in the way. They had nothing involved in it. They didn't care. Like, they weren't trying to make me feel bad. They were just being honest, right? And so then what I realized is we're always doing what we were told to do. No one ever asked us what we wanted to do. And so I think when a lot of us go, I don't know why I feel this way, or I don't know why this, right? It's because we're not connected to ourselves spiritually, because we were never given the opportunity to have free will, free thinking, free all of this, right? And so then when you're young, you're so confused because you think you're doing everything right as by society standards, but you're still not getting what you want, what you need, what you
Mm.
love, right? And so that's where I come in, is I help you get aligned with your soul's purpose, what you came here to do, why you came here to do it, why you are the way you are, if the direction you're going is best for you. So it is, I don't just work with young people, but I like getting my hands on young people because they're not so stuck in their ways that they won't shift and adjust. Do you know what I mean? And so it's
Mm.
really powerful to see young people tap into their intuition and get the answers for themselves
Mm.
than for us grown-ups to look outside of ourselves. And I'm looking for you for confirmation bias, if I'm enough or if I'm
Mm.
this. Because remember, when I was younger, we were told that if a man liked you and he was going to provide for you, then you must be a good woman. Or
Mm.
it depends on the job you had that defined who you were. But none of that has anything to do with any of it.
Mm.
How I make money is how I make a buck. That doesn't define who I am. But in my culture, it does. In
Mm.
your culture, it might be different. But
Mm.
I think with everything going on in the world, we all have to learn to be able to know how to go inward, because that's got to be the safe space. That's where the safety is. That's where the
Mm.
refuge is. Right. And no one ever told us that the way we think up here has to be safe, so that the only ever place we live is in our head.
Mm.
And if in my head, all I'm doing is gaslighting myself about, it's 10:30 on a Wednesday, you haven't made money yet. What are you doing? What
Mm.
are you doing with your life? What do you that's not a safe place for me to live.
Mm,
I didn't know that self-talk came from me. I didn't know it came from how you made me feel about me.
mm,
Do you see the difference? And
mm,
so what I like to do is I like to help people figure out how and what that means to them and looks like to them,
mm.
because everyone's different. So if that answers, that's a short answer to a long question. No, just kidding.
Thank you. Beautiful answer. And I guess, what has the journey of personal growth been like for you? Obviously, I was quite interested. I mean, you were born and raised in California,
Mhm.
and now you ended up in Italy. So that's a massive cultural shift in of itself. Obviously, you have the roots, ancestral roots, but still,
Yes,
like it's
it's a
two different
culture shock.
ways.
And well, it is a very different culture. Like Italians from, I grew up with Italians from New York. Like, how you doing? Like, like the Sopranos, right? So when I first moved to Italy, I would call my dad crying, going, "These Italians are nothing like they are in the States. You lied my whole life." I didn't understand. That's how different it was.
Wow,
Shocking. Very
wow.
shocking.
And so I guess, what are what aspect of personal growth has become significantly important to you in your journey? Obviously, judging by the conversation we're having, you're quite a open and free-spirited person, and open and free-spirited people tend to acquire a great deal of wisdom through the transitions that they go through in their life. So is there a certain aspect of personal growth um, that has
Yes.
really stood out to you in your own journey, that you're like, this is a very important part of it that maybe I wish I had realized when I was younger? Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's a great question. And I think young people will understand this more than people my age because I'm
Mm,
far ahead of myself. So I, unfortunately, at 21, started getting a lot of pain issues
mm,
and chronic pain. I've had 34 surgeries. I had five
mm,
autoimmunes.
mm.
I have a machine in my back.
Wow.
So I never knew until I don't know, during COVID, when I first started having my first spiritual awakening and then
Mm,
studying more and everything,
mm,
I didn't know. So after watching podcasts and everything, I didn't know that chronic pain is tied to stored trauma.
mm,
And so I've gone through a lot of unnecessary surgeries. I had 9 months ago advanced osteoporosis, advanced rheumatoid arthritis, advanced gout, and advanced fibromyalgia. I'm not sure where the fibromyalgia is right now, but 9 months ago, I started weaning off of 9 medications out of 12 that I take. I
mm,
started doing a sauna infrared bag. I started doing visualization meditation. I started because remember, I grew up in America where you have commercials on the TV where they're selling you pharmaceuticals.
mm,
So, how we were raised is that, oh, well, we're luckier than most because we have access to medications, which we are now finding out half of us didn't even need. They were just selling us them, right?
mm,
So, I was put on medications at a very young age. And for a very long time, there were times where I was on 22 different medications at the same time. And
mm,
so 9 months ago, I had watched a podcast and I heard this lady say, she used to work for Stanford and she put the scalpel down because she realized that it was about selling pharmaceuticals and doing operations on people who didn't need that. And she goes, most of you are probably on medications that don't need it. And I was like, something in my brain heard that, right?
mm,
So I slowly started weaning off of anything. Cut to we're at 9 months later. And I went and got all the blood work and I went and got a mock. So a mock checks your bone density for the osteoporosis.
mm.
No rheumatoid arthritis factors found.
Wow.
No osteopenia or osteoporosis found. So the only thing that I've done different is I changed my mindset. I started
Mm,
meditating. I started doing the internal work. So all of those years when I went through kidney stones, I
mm,
was getting operations, I was painful periods, all of these things. It turns out it was the foods I was eating because we're now finding out of all the stuff that's in the food,
mm, mm,
right? It turns out it was the foods I was eating, clearly alcohol I was drinking. But what I'm trying to show people is that I'm walking the walk. Okay. So do you go by pounds or kilos?
We use
When,
kilograms, yeah, kgs.
okay, so 5 years ago I was 103 kilos. And
Wow.
that was when I started the journey, but it had been
Wow.
very slow. Now I'm at 62 kilos and it's taken
Wow.
5 years, but I'm vegan, gluten-free, no refined sugar. The thing that I think has saved me a lot is I've been a vegetarian since I'm 20, but I became vegan 5 years ago. When I started being vegan, no refined sugar, no alcohol,
Mm.
and gluten free was when everything changed for me.
Wow.
And that is when I finally started releasing the weight. I put 3 autoimmunes into remission. I'm working
Mm.
on the other two. I'm, excuse me, also working on the chronic pain. So the reason why I say all of this is
Mm.
all that emotional stuff we feel when we're young. No
Mm.
one ever tells us how to deal with it or what to do with it. They just tell us not to think about it and to go on with your life. What I'm saying is, by not thinking about it, that's what got me sick. By
Mm.
pushing it down, that's what got me sick. And so it took me moving to a foreign country, right? And I was married to someone for 10 years. So I was
Mm.
still on all of that and going through emotional whatever. It
Mm.
wasn't until I'm separated from him during COVID and I was on
Mm.
my own that I could start to be less distracted and start going in. And
Mm.
that's where the real work started. And
Mm.
that's when I started learning about child work, shadow work, like
Mm.
inner child work, building relationships. And listen, for 55 and I've never had Botox or anything like that.
Mm.
It speaks for itself, the work
Mm.
that I'm doing with myself.
Mm.
And I understand that people will go, well, how do you expect us to quit that? And it's not so easy and not so that. And what I say to that is, if you're in enough pain, like I was,
You'll
there
do it.
isn't anything
No, you
you
will do
wouldn't do
it.
to get
You'll
out.
do it. Nothing is more motivating than pain itself, right?
And
Um,
the sad thing was, is it took me getting into all of that pain for me to finally take a real look and be really honest with what
mm.
I was doing, you know?
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I definitely also went through quite a similar dietary shift and obviously chronic illnesses and everything, not similar, but same type of circumstances. And eventually ended up transitioning off meat entirely. I did go vegan for some time.
Huh?
It was interesting. Then I went back to being vegetarian, and I'm in the process of going back to being fully plant-based gradually. So
Yeah,
it
well,
is.
the reason why I switched is in my spiritual journey, because I do readings and intuitive
Mm.
stuff. Um, I found out that you ingest the energy, and
Mm.
this for me, it could be that the animal felt, right?
Mm.
And so once I completely went vegan, a lot of that emotional fog went away,
A hundred
and I
percent.
had more clarity about things.
100%. No, because and now obviously I'm not being religiously specific, in any sense, but the whole principle of karma is you are what you eat, right? And so, every soul, everything that comes into this life has memory and information. So, if you're ingesting alive or dead animals information, that information has to go somewhere. So I do
Yes.
agree with you. Funny enough, short story. I mean, I always used to wonder why I would have tremendous anger issues when I was a meat eater, and I'm not criticizing meat eating at all for that matter. I mean,
Me either. Everyone has to do what's best for them.
what's best for them. But I do remember the one thing I noticed when I transitioned as well was my temperament really, really like anger control. And I've got a lot of, as everyone in this life, we all have a lot of personal issues, but they were less exaggerated after cutting off
And
consuming
you see,
certain
yours is
things.
anger and mine was sadness.
Hmm.
So we felt the animals differently. Like I
Hmm.
felt the sadness, you probably felt the rage, but either
Hmm.
way, I felt stuff that was not mine.
Hmm.
I didn't want to feel that stuff anymore. You know what I mean?
I
No,
do.
thank you.
I do. I do.
And so, and by the way, I'm gonna be morbid to a lot of your viewers and stuff, but sometimes I look at my Chihuahua and I just think about him going in the oven with potatoes, and I can't. And I'm like, no, I can't. Like, no, 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 no. And so that's what gets me every time.
Oh my goodness. No, hectic one, that one it is, but I understand exactly where you're coming from. It's the same principle.
Yeah.
And so I was just gonna ask, obviously, I was quite shocked when you mentioned that, 34 different surgeries. That's very intensive. I just
And
wanted to
traumatic
ask,
body, imagine.
yeah. So I was wondering, what about the human spirit did you learn throughout that ordeal? A lot of us, when you go through very tough physical challenges where our body ultimately is at the back end of things. It's interesting how, and I've spoken to, fortunately, a host of different people that have had to face
Hmm.
different challenges of the body, and it's amazing how each one has a different account of how the spirit was somewhat the like anchoring force through all that. So I was just wanting to ask maybe what your
No,
perspective is on.
I'll tell you, I'll never forget one time I was being wheeled into a surgery room and my ex and his sister were there and he looked at me and he goes, I don't know how you do this. And I said, do
Mm,
what? And he said, do all these surgeries. And I said, I don't have a choice. And he goes, you do have a choice. I said, I don't have a choice because if I want to get out of pain, I have to have hope that
mm,
something is going to help me or save me. So do you see the different mentalities? Hence why we're divorced now. Is that his is do nothing about nothing and think about nothing because then maybe it will go away. Says the man with a torn meniscus 8 years ago and never got surgery. I tore my meniscus 2 years after that, got a surgery. It's been done for 5 years, right? But that for me, it never I'm somebody, thankfully, in the way I had to grow up, very difficult situations, but
mm,
I've always been resilient. But it's never occurred to me to feel, not saying I haven't had pity parties, but in the way I am, the way, because I'm different than my siblings, I
mm,
just do what has to be done because for me in my brain, there's no other option because no one's coming to save me.
mm,
Right. So, how I became stronger and more resilient is I kept realizing and acknowledging what I was capable of. And I was doing it by myself. I didn't
mm,
have any options or any
mm,
someone paying my bills, or I
mm,
didn't have my family to fall back on. And I
mm,
couldn't take off of work. And I couldn't.
mm,
So you have surgery and you're back at work when you're not supposed to
mm,
lift something for 6 weeks. You're back at work waiting on tables 3 days later
mm,
because that's what you have to do.
mm,
Right. And so I think if we're going to be honest, I learned how to be resilient, but in the process, I lost my ability to be soft, to be vulnerable,
mm,
because I've had to be so strong for everyone and everything.
mm,
So the other day I was talking to my dad, and
mm,
my dad is, we talk a lot, but he's not a very emotional man. So he never says, I miss you. Either. And the other day, out of nowhere, he goes, I miss you. And all of a sudden, like I wanted to cry and my stomach, it
mm,
hurt me so bad because it reminded me that it is easier for me to live in getting what I don't want because I'm used to that and it's less painful.
mm,
It was more painful to hear this 85-year-old man say, I miss you, because it made me more vulnerable and soft, going, wait, what? I wasn't prepared for that. Right. And then it made me realize that I lost my bit of ability to be vulnerable and show up. I can show up for everybody else and I can want them to be vulnerable, or I can be the strong person on their team, but I'm not the one asking for help. Hence, again, why I like to work with young people. I don't want them to do what I'm doing. So,
mm,
yeah, I'm resilient, but it's not balanced.
mm.
You got to learn the balance of when to be vulnerable, when to be resilient. You can't just go through life and get all resilient and then say you want love when you don't even know how to accept love from yourself for yourself.
Wow, powerful words, powerful words. Very intuitive you are actually.
Thank you. You never
Actually,
know all this intelligence comes from
yeah.
space. Ah.
No, and I guess was there a particular revelation that you had that pretty much shifted your entire spiritual understanding of yourself? A
Yes.
lot of people have that one aha moment in very strange circumstances. So I'm wondering if perhaps you also had something
Um,
similar happen to you.
yes. I had a healer in 2021. Some girl got me a session with a healer. I cannot till this day find that girl or that healer. It's like they disappeared, right? And that lady had said to me, I think you're so attached to your belief and your religion that I'm
Mm,
afraid to go any further with you. And I was like, what you talk about, Willis? It was the first time,
mm,
it wasn't the first time people questioned my religion, but it
mm,
was the first time people gave me, someone gave me a perspective of that
mm,
God is inside all of us and we are an extension of God, not God
mm,
is outside of you. You need to bow to God, to the big
mm,
man in the sky, right? Because I grew up Christian. I grew up so
mm,
many different religions, right? But
mm,
Christian was the main one where it's fear mongering in my experience, right?
mm,
And so after that lady had said that, I was so confused. I didn't understand what she meant. But then slowly after that, then I decided to quit drinking.
mm,
And after the drinking distraction went away, right? And then we're in COVID, so we have no other choice but to go inward, right? And
mm,
not be distracted. So then I was like, well, what is she talking about? And then I started listening to podcasts. And then in 2022 on Audible, I listened to 5,200 hours of self-help books. Okay.
mm,
So of walking during COVID, just walking by myself with the dogs because no one could
mm,
go out and I'm in Italy and you're with you, right?
mm,
And it wasn't until then that I started understanding, wait a minute, this isn't making sense to me.
mm,
And it made more sense to me when she said, God is inside of all of us and we are an extension of God than anything I had ever learned my whole life in church, religion, everything. And
mm,
it was the first time I wasn't afraid of God. It
mm,
was it was the first time I wasn't afraid of, well, I'm going to be judged and he's going to make me
mm,
did it. So then I started diving deeper into that, what that meant for me, because I've always been spiritual, right?
mm,
And I wrote something down today, which I think is meant for this, but I think it's really powerful. Spirituality is when we find God within ourselves. Religion is when we look for God outside of ourselves,
mm,
right? So I kept looking outside of myself and God wasn't there because God's in me for me,
mm,
right? Depends on who you are and how you believe. But why wouldn't God be in me if we're all God's children and we are extension
mm,
of God and God is the light because light is everywhere, right? And
mm,
so I just started thinking different. I started seeing the world differently. And then you start going, okay, what not everything is what it seems. What does that mean? And then I started thinking and things started falling in my old belief systems. And then unfortunately, I don't talk to half of my family anymore because of the elections and the man
mm,
coming into things, right? And then it's so polarizing how everyone sees things so differently from their frame of thinking, right? So I'm everything that I tell myself I am.
mm,
And I never knew that that was the reality. I'm not what you tell me. I
mm,
have to confirm what you tell me in order for me to become that. Right.
mm,
So then when I started learning that, I went through a period where I was angry, not too angry, but I was a little mad, not at God, but at religion. And
mm,
then I was also mad at being lied and conditioned on a
mm,
system of like, I was thinking about this the other day. Think about this. I was talking to my friend and her kid and her kids too. And I almost said, what do you want to be when you grow up?
mm,
And my mind goes, don't you dare say that to that sweet little child. But that's how young our conditioning started. You get a
mm,
bit used to start working. You get a bit used to did it. So you start to hear things and see things when you're outside of it, and
mm,
it gives you a different perspective. So it wasn't just one moment in one thing, but it was one moment that catapulted all the other things. It's me being able to hold space for all parts of myself. I grew up in a household where if something was wrong, my mom was so dramatic, no one could move or do anything unless we had enough money for the rent or we had enough money for the and so then
mm,
I grew up with ADHD and
mm,
everything,
mm,
paralysis. I would just stay going, wait, what do you mean I'm allowed to go run errands and do things if I don't have the rent? And so I started questioning things. I started learning things, but I found out during this that I'm also ADHD and autistic. And
mm,
it turns out I'm a literal person. So all of those things I heard growing up, I took literally and I
mm,
applied to my adult life. And
mm,
I'm taking literal things from two very um not so healthy people, right? And I'm taking that as literal and I'm applying
mm,
that to everyone and everything. And then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. And so now what I'm trying to avoid with young people is at 52, I had to unlearn and relearn everything. I
Mm,
don't want young people to have to do that. I didn't know I was neurodivergent. I didn't know I was
mm,
autistic. So I'm not a control freak. I'm not cold. I'm not this. I'm just autistic. I'm not
mm,
crazy or on drugs. I'm just ADHD. Right. But my whole life, people are like, you so crazy, Dina, you crazy. Well, yeah, turns out I am a little crazy and I don't mind, but it's not the crazy everyone else was talking about. So it's really important. I would have never known any of that if I wasn't doing self-reflection and I wasn't going in. It explained why I am the way I am and why I do the things I do. I
mm,
wasn't controlling. My nervous system was just dysregulated. I
mm.
wasn't a bitch. I was just attacked because my nervous system was dysregulated. Do you
Yeah,
see? So
yeah.
nothing is what it seems.
No, and thank you for being honest with it. It takes courage and conviction to not only stand up for your own actions, but to just understand that, you one willing, you're accountable, and two, you're also empathetic to understand why people do certain things. It takes, and I feel like from what I've noticed, it's only unfortunately at old age when we really tap into the
Yeah.
nature of empathy. When we're
Well,
young.
thankfully, I've been empathetic most of my life, but
Mm,
my empathy I used to use against me.
mm,
So I would think that if I felt guilt or something, it was my job to fix your emotions. Now, what I'm realizing is ain't my job unless you ask for help.
mm.
Right. But before I would take on all the emotional responsibility of everyone around me, which is also unhealthy, which also contributes to chronic pain.
Wow, no. Powerful stuff, eh? Powerful stuff.
It's
And
been, thank you for opening this platform because I don't think people realize how important these conversations are. And if we're being honest, I think it takes brave people like me, but to show up and be like, look, I look just like you and I look just like you and whatever. And I've been through some shiz.
mm,
And so
mm,
if I can do it, you can too, because I've walked through it. And look, I'm showing you what comes out the other end. And this is 55 with no Botox, no nothing. So if you do the internal work, it literally reflects on the external.
no, no, that's beautiful. That's
Thank
beautifully
you.
said. And you have a beautiful spirit, obviously. So I guess I was gonna ask what type of methodology that you've had with your clients that you've seen to really be effective. Everyone has a different approach in terms of
Mm-hmm.
how they help people, but what have you noticed with the people that you've worked with that's really helped them make that's really helped
Um,
them embrace that next shift?
holding, holding people accountable, meaning people, we all need accountability, but I
Mm,
hold people accountable to themselves, not to me.
mm,
So, meaning that I will give you homework or roads to go down. You're not hurting me by not doing it. You're hurting yourself. So it's your money. You're doing like whatever you're spending, right?
mm,
But if you give it to the perspective of that, you find people creating this thing for themselves where they want better for themselves. I can't want better for you. You've got to want better for you, right? And so I'll give you a strange example, and this is why I'm saying it. I remember right before the California fires had happened, and I had had a client, and I didn't see like her house burning or like whatever. I just kept seeing her moving, right?
mm,
But from the very beginning, she goes, "No, I'm not moving. I don't know why you would say that." And she got very anxious because I guess I triggered something in her about moving that
mm,
she didn't want to hear about, right?
mm,
And I guess throughout her session, 5 different times, I asked her to get adjusted to the maybe just even the idea of moving.
mm,
Cut to 3 days later, unfortunately, she lost everything in the fires, right?
mm,
But she then wrote me and said, you tried warning me in so many ways, but I didn't listen.
mm,
Listen, it wasn't that you didn't listen, you just weren't ready. The
mm,
fact that you're getting perspective now instead of blaming me means that you're really ready now. But
mm,
it just took maybe, sometimes I have another client who literally was in an accident and she broke 13 bones in her body. For her to get it, that she needed to slow down and she needed to stop. She wasn't doing it before then. And I was like, you better figure this out before the universe does it for you. The universe did it for her. Right. So I think you don't scare people, but you empower people with their own power
to make
to
choices
help
for
them
themselves.
shift their the mindset, right? And it's different for everyone and how we lean into that, because I will acclimate to how your emotions and feelings are, the way I will talk to you as opposed to somebody else. Some people I'm just right direct because they don't want to cut through the emotional bullshit and they don't have the bandwidth to hold space. Other people you have to be very gentle with, right? And so where I come in is with the intuition, we figure out which way is the best way to come at you with the information that you need so that you don't crumble and that you want to keep working. But I really don't think people understand the power of your mindset and how you talk to yourself.
And
It's the mindset and the shift and the power and the everything of how you turn around. Negativity is contagious. Positivity is contagious. I used to live with my ex and he would always be so negative. And I go, dude, could you please? And he goes, I met one of your clients. I go, it has nothing to do with that. I'm in a small space with you and it's contagious. I'm going to pick up on your bad habits. I'm going to pick up on, just as you would with me. Right. So I'm not trying to control you, but when you're driving and he goes, I hope your whole family dies, you mongoloid. I'm like, really? The whole family? Like, why does it got to be the whole family? Why can't it? No, he deserves. And it's like, really? All of that? And I was just like, it was just too much. When I was in that, I was the sickest I had ever been. And it turns out that's from narcissistic style kind of person, right? So turns out that my body is very reactive to narcissistic people and not in a good way. And it turns out he reminded me of my dad. And then I was like, oh no, I married my dad. And then I was like, oh no. And then you realize, and then you start getting perspective. And then you're like, oh no, what had happened? And now we're the best of friends. And I already know that this is what I live by in my beautiful brain. It's not a matter of if he's going to be a jerk again. It's a matter of when he's going to be a jerk again. I never get it twisted and I never think he's different. And I never give him more credit than the work that he's done. I know him for who he is until he shows me differently. He has never showed me differently. So I'm not going to believe in him more than he believes in him. So I know how to navigate through that and I'm not a victim of it anymore.
Wow. No, definitely a lot of introspective stuff. You
I'm a
always
kind of
learn.
deep, right? It's
Yeah,
kind
no,
of deep.
you're
A lot of
always learning.
introspection for 5 years of COVID. I'm like, I guess I really did do a lot of inner work.
No, you did, and it's definitely paid credence to, I guess, just the happiness you found within yourself.
Yeah, it's the
We all
happiest I've ever been. And so thank you for noticing that. Because
no.
honestly, if people were to tell me, you don't understand how happy you will be if you find yourself within yourself, I would have been like, oh, yeah, okay. There's no way, from everything that I was raised on or the narratives I was told, unless I would have felt it myself, I would have never believed it.
No, it's definitely a work in progress. It's easier said than done. We live in a
Yeah.
materialistic plane where our senses are constantly engaged. So the inner sense that you speak of is, and as someone struggling with it myself on a day-to-day basis, particularly the younger generation, our generation, it's a lot of difficulty when you're forced to face the outside world. You kind of have no choice. So it's hard to ignore certain things. And yes, you want to find that inner space, but then 2 seconds later, you have to be doing this. And then,
Totally.
it's a very dualistic world we live in. But I think that ultimately we're all on the path to finding what,
For sure. And think about me. I grew up in California. So imagine when I was young, I lived in a city called Newport Beach, Orange County,
Mm,
where people jokingly, and it's racist, but remember this was what, 45 40 years ago. So people used to call me the housekeeper's kid because I looked ethnic or I looked Mexican, and everyone was blonde, right? So I didn't know I was attractive until I left high school and I moved to LA, where it was more of a melting pot. But then you take me to LA and I'm trying to pursue acting. You're too heavy, you're not attractive enough, you'll never be the leading lady, your hair's too long, you're too ethnic, people don't know what you are in 30 seconds, we can't send you out commercially. So being rejected. And at the time, I was a size 7, an American 7, and I was always told I was too fat and I was too unattractive. And so literally with that pounded in your head every day on top of your own insecurities and the insecurities with the body dysmorphia I grew up in Orange County about being skinny, and then also needing to be skinny in California. And then to my sweet little surprise, in my sweet brain, I thought all my problems were because I was fat. And no one ever told me all my problems weren't going to go away. Now I'm finally skinny and I still have freaking problems. What the hell? I want my money back. Like, I thought everything was going to be fine because everyone always told me you just need to lose weight to find a man, to be an actress, to get that job, to do whatever, to have a good summer. I did it. And so what? Nothing's changed. Nothing has changed other than the fact that I don't beat myself up about food every day.
Wow.
Hence why, again, I like to work with young people.
Wow.
Do you see?
Yeah. No,
It's crazy.
it's crazy. It's so crazy what we live in. No, Dina, it's I guess I did have 2 more questions, which
Okay,
were actually
let's
quite
do it.
pertinent. How do people reach out to you, one? And
Okay,
do you do your sessions in person or online as well?
online. So they can reach out to me on Instagram is Dena Paduano, DenaPaduano. On TikTok, I'm Intuitive Coach Dina, and on YouTube, I'm Intuitive Coach Dina. I do sessions how we're doing now. And so people would literally call me. I record it. We do FaceTime, Zoom, whatever somebody wants to do. They'll send me pictures and signature through email. And then they cash out me or they send me money through, whatever. And then we make time, and then I record the session, and then I send them a copy of the recording. But I do coaching and then I do reading. So readings is if it's a one-time shot. You want to come in, you just want to know about your life, you want to know where you're going. Great, that's a reading. But then I also offer coaching, which is cheaper than readings, but it's a monthly thing where it helps keep you accountable to yourself so that you can keep going in the right direction. And that's what I always recommend to people, because it's very easy to get off track if we don't have a Dina going, dude, so what's up? Like, it's nice to see you. Tell me about your month. And then we get into it and I can tap in, because you can't lie to my intuition, right? And intuition speaks for itself. And so I think what really happens for people is they know it's do or die, in this sense is I'm going to let my ego die and I'm going to go in this direction. I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing and I'm going to keep getting what I've always gotten. So it's options. It's up to people. You know what I mean? And so I think it's really important for people to discover that they want more out of their life than what they're on the treadmill for. The constant treadmill of, just get back on and keep making money for the man. No, we're going to empower ourselves and we're going to redirect and change our mindset so that we can get away from the man. And you know what I mean by the man. You work for the man. I don't want to work for the man or the woman. I want to work for myself. But in the States, we say, got to go work for the man. And no one wants to work for the man. Right? And so I am here because listen, people of your age are all entrepreneurial. And I think that's amazing. But I also think people your age have the access to spirituality the way people my age didn't. And so I think the reason why I skip millennials, right? So I'm Gen X. So then there's millennials and then there's Gen Z. I think I skip millennials because I don't know that. I didn't grow up with that. I was older then and I was off doing my own thing. I really connect with young people because their hearts are so sweet and their feelings, they care about feelings. My generation didn't care about feelings. And so, and I'm not sure about millennials, I can't speak for that. But so for me, it's so important for people to understand how important their feelings are, and we don't shove them down so that we don't create chronic pain and we don't create trauma, and we don't, because scientists say that if I can hold space with you for 8 minutes to talk about whatever you're going through, you're not going to push that down, you're going to push it away. So what I do sometimes, if I can't find someone to hold space with, I put on the camera on my computer and I hold space with myself and I talk to myself, because sometimes people are busy and I get that. But I can't wait around for other people to hold space for me because I don't want to store this trauma.
Yeah.
So I'm learning hacks and things and ways to show up for myself. And this is what I like to teach people.
Beautiful. No, Dina, honestly, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, for being transparent with your own experiences and being authentic. I really admire you being very authentic. I
I
mean,
appreciate that.
in a world of a lot of falsities, at least it's good to see that at the end of the day, we always come back to ourselves, no matter what. We can't avoid that path. We can't avoid that inevitability. And again, as you mentioned, everything is in its own time, and whenever someone
Yeah.
decides to come into that space. So the last question I was going to ask, so what are your words of wisdom and
Okay.
advice for the audience tuning in today?
Oh, any advice for the audience?
Words of
I
wisdom and advice for the audience.
Okay, words
Yeah.
of wisdom and advice. My words of wisdom is nothing is what it seems. And I want you to go inward and I want you to find your own definition and your own meaning of things without somebody else's words in your mouth. And then also, if you're finding yourself explaining yourself too much or justifying yourself to other people, there's something wrong with that. Someone's behavior towards me, if someone behaves or says something in a certain way, I'm not going to justify their behavior. Oh, but they said it because they were in a rush and they're no. I'm going to let your words speak for you. And I am no longer going to justify your behavior anymore. And if I sit with that and go, wait, that was kind of rude, or why would they just say that? Or da 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 da. What I'm learning is to allow things to be what they are and allow people's behaviors to speak for themselves. And I'm holding individuals accountable, including myself. And I'm sorry, someone spoke to me very disrespectfully the other day. I didn't get an attitude with her. Mental note. You will not speak to me that again. I will put up a boundary next time. But the only reason I didn't this time because it was out of character for you. And I'm going to assume you were having a bad day that day. But if it happens again, mental note, I will put up a boundary. So there's a difference. People show you who they are, but we will always justify the behavior. So then we can believe the behavior we've justified. When I say people show you who they are, believe them without justifying their behavior and let them show you who they are and believe who they are without your excuses of who they are. So many people show us who they are and we don't believe it. And then we find ourselves 6 months, 6 years, whatever, in going, oh my God, I don't know why I didn't listen. But we were just because we wanted something so bad. We wanted to make it fit. So we would justify the behavior in our head to make it okay so that we could do it. What I'm saying is it's a dead end either way. You're going to have to abort mission at somewhere down the line. So I'd rather hurt now than hurt later. Right? So stop believing your own lies. Stop believing the lies you tell yourself about that situation, that person, that job, that whatever. You know, if something intuitively is talking to you, it's for a reason. Investigate, do your own homework, go in and go, do I really want another job? Or does my ego want me to have another? Or is that boss just not a really great boss? You already know the answer, but it's all the inner workings that are distracting you. You see? And so I think it's really important because people who have had bad behavior had been getting away with it for far too long. And now I'm not calling people out on their bad behavior. I'm just not having you in my life. You're not invited to the party. I used to always put up with bad behavior. And I used to thought the bigger jerk you were, if you were nice to me, I must have been really special. But I realized that that was only me dealing with narcissistic people. And I didn't understand with my dad being a narcissist because I was the favorite. I didn't know what a narcissist was or any of that was. And it just turns out that he pitted all of us kids against each other. And it was nothing was what it seemed. So you don't know where people are and what people are going through and how far along they are with their journey. And so what I say is you got to go in and you got to start asking yourself, how does this make me feel? It sounds easy, but takes a little work.
No, Dina's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank
I
you.
know it's super late, that this
No, it's
side and that
okay, but
side.
thank you for taking the time. And it
No,
was
no,
so nice
thank
to
you.
meet
Thank
you.
you for giving the time. It's always a pleasure to have people come on and just share their truth, their experience. It really shows you just how broad the world is, one, and how you're not the only one, which is a very, very funny experience. But we tend to forget it when we're caught up in our problems, for real.
Totally. We think we're the only one. And don't forget, there are still really good people out there.
No, they're 100%, 100%. And
We all have to find each other.
so wishing you the best in your journey
Thank
as you
you.
expand,
It's
as you meet new
nice to meet
people. Sorry, it kind of blotted you out there.
you. No, I said it was so nice to meet you.
There
And
was it.
thank you so much for everything you're doing. And what a great listener you are. And literally, your questions are amazing. So thank you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you so much. And for those of you tuning in, feel free to reach out to Dina. She's very personable, very funny.
Thank
Very,
you.
very, very funny. So I think we need a lot more humor in today's world. And I think that'll make people more willing to be vulnerable when there's that sense of, okay, you don't have to take everything too seriously. We can laugh
Yeah.
about certain things, which may be a bit difficult. So you definitely have that openness to you. So I'm sure
Thank
many
you.
more will reach out, and all the best with engaging with people. I know this coaching path is quite karma intensive. There's a lot that you have to navigate. So
Yeah.
I'm wishing you all the very best of that and the wisdom to kind of, get through it
So
as
much.
gracefully as possible. So
I'm
thank you.
wishing you the same, but I hope like in a while from here we could catch up with each other and see where we're at online, like on another podcast to see how much you've grown and I've grown, you know?
It'll be awesome. No, it'll
Because
be
I
good.
would love to check in to see where this podcast is taking you, where having spiritual conversations is taking you, because I think that your world is about to open up in very big ways. And I want you to be prepared for it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
It's been a pleasure.
Thank
Dina
you.
Paduano, everyone. It was awesome.
Thank you. Okay.